Welcome to MediaPod Smash 149. As you can see behind me, we are still deep into the Halloween production, and it'll probably come down right to the wire again, but, you know, it's still a lot of fun, and I don't regret it. But I probably will keep bitching until the end as well, so sorry in advance. Since we're getting close to 150, which kind of blows my mind a little bit, I thought it'd be kind of cool to just go back and reflect on the whole history of this podcast, because, well, it's been around quite a bit. This October will actually be the 10-year anniversary of the very first episode of MediaPod Smash. There's probably a lot of people that don't know the history since it has been so long ago. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of enlighten people and really kind of reflect to myself, because 10 years, that's a lot to think about. So much happens in a decade. I mean, so much happens in just a year, but this is a story. So it all kind of started in 2010. I was a year into school, and I had met some contacts that were also into the same thing that I was. I wrote a script called Small Town Zombie Folk. And this wasn't my first screenplay, but it was probably my first, actually polished screenplay. And I was going to be making this into something. That was my plan. I wanted to spend the whole summer of 2010 into 2011 making this movie. Around the same time, I also started working at Walmart. And this is where I would eventually meet a guy named Robert. And it turned out that he was also very interested in film. And I kind of, explained what I was doing and trying to achieve. And he was like, awesome. Not knowing that I was, at the time, kind of a lazy piece of shit. But we'll get back to that. So nothing really got off the ground too much in 2010. It was more just like the writing process and meeting a lot of different contacts and people that would be, key players for this attempted movie, and people that would actually still have an impact in my life now. And so nothing really too crazy though, but summer of 2011 is where things started to really get rolling. I should back up. I bought a really expensive camera, and I'll probably never get to live it down, because some people will always remember that. But I had this idea in my head that if you buy expensive stuff, obviously, it'll be a lot easier to shoot. You're just like, boom, it's just all set up for you. But again, I was a young, naive person. But it did look cool to have a big camera. You got to go into places and people really took you serious. And we used it for a majority of the filming. Most of the cast in this movie was made up of close friends of mine, some people that I would meet in college, like I mentioned, and that was about it. So with my cast in place, and my script, and the camera, and my friend Robert, who was really good with behind the scenes stuff. He was he had an eye for different angles and shooting, and that was his thing. And that's why it was kind of a cool team we had there for a while. He was always on the production end, and I liked to perform. So we actually did get some pretty cool stuff done. We shot an opening, we shot some scene in a lab, which was actually part of just a school classroom, and we just barely got that location locked down. We shot a party scene and we shot a scene at a gas station, which is interesting, actually, because we did this twice. I believe we did this once in that summer of 2010 as sort of like a proof of concept and a trailer. And then we went back to that same gas station. They were really cool, too. They were just like, yeah, whatever. And so that summer of 2011, we went back to that gas station and we filmed an actual scene there. And in all honesty, it was a great day. It went well. It was our first like zombie scene, and the guy who played the zombie in this was a guy I met in college named Kyle, and he was super cool, very like just on board for whatever. It was just like, hey, you want me to put more makeup on? Go for it. Or you want me to do this take again and make it more zombie-like? Whatever you need, man. It was just like, he was just happy to help, and I thought that was great. I mean, he was a really cool dude. This is like where I feel bad the most, because I think back to all these different supportive people that I had, and well, there was no movie. Spoilers. The movie never came to fruition, because once that summer ended, things kind of started, I guess going off the rails. We started to, at the same time of the filming, actually, we started doing a podcast. We didn't really call it a podcast at the time. It was just audios that went up on our official Small Town Zombie Folk website. And it was kind of just a way to update people as to where we were at with the filming and the process. We called these audios Small Town Chronicles. And we did about 6 of them. The first 2 were actually during the peak of our filming days, which were going really well. And as things went along, you can kind of hear our spiral, and the show sort of turn into an early version of Media Pod Smash, because I start to just bring up random things and what if topics and different scenarios, and because we started to run out of things to talk about, because it actually became kind of depressing, because things just started to become like a train wreck. Like, we started skipping weekends and just not following up with a lot of things, and just realizing like we might be in a little bit over our heads here. And so by the end of that year, we kind of were at a crossroads and wondering what to do next. And we knew we wanted to keep working on projects together, but we were wondering if maybe the movie should just be put on the shelf for a while. So in 2012, we started a little film production team called Gerbil Productions, which was spelled Jerbil, which is my first name and part of Robert's last name. And when we started that, we just started really getting into more short films, and that became more of our thing. And we kind of just, unfortunately, let Small Town Zombie Folk die. And around the same time that we started the Gerbil Productions thing, I also decided that I was kind of into doing this audio thing. I really liked the Small Town Chronicles that we had done a year prior, and I created this thing called Media Pod Smash, which was actually originally it was something that I was starting with my friend Colin, and we were going to just do commentary over bad movies. And we have like about 6 of those as well. I never really released those anywhere. I mean, they were released originally, but never since then. And I have yet to listen to them. It's been years since I've last heard them. So I might put them up at some point, but I have to go through them and make sure they're like, okay. So that was originally what Media Pod Smash was. And the logo actually was very kind of a crude idea, but we were just like, we were smashing media with a hammer because, we were just like shitting on crappy movies. So it was Media Pod Smash. And I felt like it actually really rolled off the tongue, and I was like, it doesn't have to really mean that much. It's just, as long as it's like memorable, that's half the battle right there. And so that went on for a while, and eventually, but in between like doing different films and stuff, Robert and I would find ourselves sitting around bored and just wondering like, oh, what should we do? And I thought back to those episodes of Small Town Chronicles, and I'm like, we should just do that, but we don't have to talk about small town zombie folk. Like, let's just all structure a show. And I find it incredible that he agreed to do this, because if you are a fan of the show and you listen back to those early ones and you're familiar with the lore, you know that Robert was a big introvert and just not a talker. So it was like, oh, perfect place for you, a co-host. But it actually kind of was perfect, because I loved the sound of my own voice, and he just let me go on tangents a lot. So it was great. And I mean, I do say that kind of jokingly, but like there was some great chemistry and some great moments, I thought. So those audios became Media Pod Smash. I stole the name of the old show and put it to this because I thought this had more of a chance of becoming something. Sorry, Colin. But I mean, you understand. So after we started, we put the first one out in October. I think it was October 4th or something of 2012. And the first episode was just kind of me going on a rant about Walmart, which would become a common thing. But I had just gotten a new position there at the time. I was a hardware manager, and I fucking hated it. It was so boring, and so I let people know all about how I hated it, and it became the show became a really good outlet for that. Like, I wonder like what would have happened if I didn't have that, because I really vented a lot. I would probably have gotten fired. Although I was surprised I also did get fired for having these audios out there, but that luckily no one really listened. So it kind of started off really, I would say, strong. Like, we did that opening episode, and then really we kept it up on a weekly basis for a year. And October was a great time to start, because from episode 2 to episode 5 we did all Halloween action, which was something that we both really enjoy. And yeah, like, we just kept it going for a long time, and that was amazing for us. So we got to the 1 year mark, and it was exciting, but I kind of felt that we were losing steam. The show was starting to, I don't know, get a little stale. I wasn't always putting in the most care. I wasn't in the best mindset all the time back then, and it just wasn't as fun for Robert, because, like I said, he wasn't a talker. So it was kind of like, all right, that's enough. And I get it, it was, I totally understand. But that left me in a position where I needed to figure something out. So eventually, so at the same time that the 1 year mark came, we also, just a little bit before that, started another podcast called Pop Culture Roulette. And this could be a whole nother thing on its own, but basically there were 2 other people that I met through Walmart that I really hit it off with, and we started another podcast because they eventually, I told the tale of how Robert and I started this thing, and we were big into filming, and we all kind of had a love for pop culture, and Kevin Smith specifically. So we started Pop Culture Roulette, and it was great. It was another podcast that really started off strong, and we had a pretty nice, loyal following there for a while. And when I got to the year mark of MediaPod Smash and things started to fall apart, I leaned into PCR as like, all right, I still have this thing to do, which was fun. It was great. It was something to keep me occupied, but I still felt like I wanted something that like just allowed me to express myself fully, because I'm selfish and I have an ego, because that's how most creative types are, right? So 2014 to 2016, I every once in a while would keep trying to put a random episode out here and there. There would be every once in a while, Robert and I would reunite and do like an anniversary thing, or if something special happened, like we did one where we went on a trip and I logged the conversation in the car, and but nothing like consistent. It was all just little things here and there. However, PCR did remain pretty consistent. We had a pretty good run there. Although I use consistent, I guess, kind of loosely, because there was the occasional gap, and I wasn't always the most motivated at editing and putting things up, so we'd end up with like a lot of audio, and like it'd all be unlabeled because I would just drag it from the SD card to the desktop and I'd say sort later, which is probably how we ended up losing an episode or two. But eventually PCR just kind of went the same way of MediaPod Smash, and a lot of it had to do with me again. Just I don't know, I was, if you're familiar with any of the past stories on here, you kind of know that's where the years got a little wild for me. I was really big into drinking, and I just kind of lost that spark to do creative things. I mean, we'd been at it so long, and it was hard when you didn't see like major results, but I mean, if I could go back and talk to that version of myself now, I'd be like, well, first of all, it's not about the results, and second of all, it's clear why you're not getting results. I mean, it sucks. We were doing this from home, which was good. It was cool to have everyone around the table, and we were mostly prepared, and we were getting good by the end, but our audio sucked. Our consistency sucked. Our promotion sucked. And it was just kind of like, by the end, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but it was like, oh, you just show up and it's like just another job now. So the passion kind of dissipated. And so, if I were to talk to myself, it'd be like, it's obvious, but it's always obvious when you have all the years of growth and time to look back. But I never really quit. I mean, my mind always did have creative ideas in it, and I knew at one point we were going to save this thing. I didn't know how necessarily, but in 2017 to 2018, I sort of started getting like a little back on track personally. Like I lost weight, and I did slow my drinking down a little bit, but it wasn't quite enough. But we did try to do a revival in that year. We called it Point Cubed. So Point Cubed was kind of a way for me, I thought, to not always have to focus so much on doing homework and knowing about pop culture things, because sometimes I don't watch stuff, which is apparent now when we get to the end of our new version of Pop Culture Roulette, but we'll get back to that. So we started Point Cubed, and we made that to, I think, 6 episodes again. So if you're keeping score at home, that's like 6 episodes for every attempted old show. I don't know why. That must be a cursed number or something. But for whatever reason, the show fell apart, and we just kind of took the time off, and I really at that point stopped doing a lot of shit. That was kind of like, all right, if this thing doesn't work, then like, I guess we're just not meant to do it. But that's just not a good way of thinking about things. And it's definitely not a mindset I have now. So what eventually, at the end of the day, so what happened here, to make a long story short, what happened is I eventually got my own act together, and I thought to myself, like, this doesn't have to be over. Like, okay, so maybe you didn't get to do all the stuff that you were hoping to do in your 20s, but you tried and you learned a lot of lessons. And with the newfound energy from having achieved the things like quitting nicotine and alcohol, you can take on more shit and try one more time or another time. And it doesn't have to be one more time. It can be another and then another after that and another after that, and as many as it takes. And so I was like, let's start another podcast. I want to make it different, though. So we first started this podcast called Vamping About Voorhees in 2020 or maybe late 2019. I can't remember. And this one was something that was very, very different from anything we'd done in the past. I mean, not very, very. I mean, we've talked about movies, but this was us kind of doing specific dives into movies. Specifically, Friday the 13th, the franchise. And I knew immediately who I wanted on board for this one. And that was my good friend Ryan. Someone that I grew up with and someone that I watched many slasher films with and even actually shot some short films with back in the day of our own. And so I asked him, I didn't know if he'd be receptive, but he was on board and we went for it. We did almost all of them. We never made it to Jason X or Jason Goes to Hell. But every other Jason, or the remake, but every other Jason movie was covered. And we had a blast. So much fun, though, actually, that we didn't want it to just stop there. And that's when I figured, well, actually, and also what happened was Ryan started listening to MediaPod Smash again because one of the related tracks auto-played on SoundCloud. So where do we go from here? I mean, it's limitless. I'm thinking we'll start off with some great Halloween content, and then from there, who knows? All I know is that I'm happy this is back, and I'm not going anywhere for a long time. MediaPod Smash off.